and she's little petite now.
Everybody finds it on the web, but most of them find it through the Toastmasters International website. And I'm sure that we can improve our
And she did that a few years ago, and the kids finally
keywords and things like that, but I'm sure that that's
I always meant to do that. Thank you, Toastmasters, for coming to order. We are ready for the second half of our meeting, where we will hear the prepared speeches. Please help me welcome Carol Ritchie. She is going to be breaking ice. It's her icebreaker.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and guests. He said it was an icebreaker, so let's break some ice. It's 110 degrees outside. What do you expect? We'll pass that around at the end. It's more fun that way. An icebreaker. What is it? To introduce myself to this group. So I would like to think of life as a road. And you start at the beginning of the road, and that's mile 0, and then you get over here to the rest of the road. So mile 0 for me starts out in San Antonio, Texas, where I was born. And then at about the 3-mile marker, we moved to Fort Worth. And at the 7-mile marker, we moved to Atlanta, Georgia. My dad worked for the federal government. What can I say? We finally stayed in Atlanta. And that's where I graduated from high school. But then I got back to Texas just as fast as I could. I came back to attend college at Abilene Christian University. And I decided that was a really nice place to go finish growing up. I was 1,000 miles away from mom and dad, so they didn't have to know about stupid things that I did. And they didn't have any friends in Abilene who would call them up and go, I saw your daughter doing so-and-so. So it was a nice place to go finish growing up. I studied chemistry, I studied biology, was trying to go pre-med, didn't get in the first time. So I decided, what else do you do? Go for a master's. Certainly didn't want to go get a job, you know. I knew how to go to school. Daddy, just write the checks and I could keep going. So I did a master's in anatomy, and then didn't get in that year either. So I went to nursing school. Still didn't want to get a job. Gee whiz, you know. Spent about 3 days in nursing school and figured out I did not want to be a nurse because I do not take orders well, and at that time nurses were not paid to think, they were paid to follow orders. But, you know, Dad had already paid the tuition, I didn't have anything else to do for the year, so I went to nursing school. Reapplied to medical school, and that time I got in. So about mile 24, I moved to San Antonio to begin medical school at the medical school in San Antonio through the UT system. And I spent 2.5 years there, and then I got smart and figured out I didn't want to be a doctor either. News flash to my parents. My mother was the one who would have liked to have been the doctor, but I wasn't cut out for it. I now look back and realize I was so ADD that I had a heck of a time studying for medical school. No wonder I decided I didn't want to go into medicine and stay there. But that led me to a career that was really enjoyable. I ended up getting into clinical research for patients that had cancer and were being placed on a clinical trial. And the whole idea of a clinical trial is to either find a better way to treat the tumor, more people survive, or a less toxic way to treat the tumor, which means there aren't as many side effects or they're not as severe as with the other treatment. And in order to do those kinds of studies, you had to have people like me that tracked down all the little lab results and the x-rays and all that jazz on these patients, because the doctors put them on those studies. They sure weren't going to fill out the forms and send them into the statistical center and all that stuff. So that was what I did, and I really enjoyed it for about 6 or 7 years. And then I got married to my very best friend from church. We had known each other for years and years. He had been one of the Air Force boys at church. He wasn't interested in dating. He wanted to finish his college education. So after he graduated and got a real job, then I wrote him a letter and asked him if he'd ever thought about dating me. The nice thing was that we lived 500 miles apart. So if he wrote me back and went, no, I've never thought about dating you and I'm not interested now, we could still be friends, and we didn't have to see each other every week at church. Actually, he wrote me back in 4 days, and I knew, because he wrote back in 4 days, that it was a positive response. Other people that had declined, it took about 3 weeks to figure out how to respond. So this poor guy did not know that he was giving me a positive response, the mere fact that he wrote it in 4 days. But at the end of the letter, he makes plans to come see me. And I'm going, well, you know, there was a line out of the President's Men, all the President's Men, that said a non-denial denial. That's what that letter was. He thought he was saying he didn't think much of long-distance relationships, but then he makes plans to come see me. So 9 months later, we got married. What can I say? So that was mile 35. I was sort of a late bloomer for the bride stuff, but hey, I was in graduate school when everybody else was getting married. So we got married when I was 35, adopted our first child when I was 41, and I just realized that I left a prop in this, right here. My little gal that I adopted as a newborn is now a big old 15-year-old girl, and that is Christina. And we adopted her at 2 days old, and she has been an interesting child to raise. We did not know that she had been exposed to fetal alcohol, but she was, and that tends to kind of melt parts of their brain. So she has been a challenge. But I also think God prepared us, and particularly me, with the background that I had, to be an advocate for her medical care, and the fact that I actually enjoyed psychiatry when I was in medical school. Because it's taken everything I know to help her. Our son came along at mile 43. This is Daniel. And Daniel is a 13-year-old young man that's struggling through puberty, and I just hope he makes it. All of us in this room survived it. Most people survive it, so I assume Daniel will survive it also. That brings you up on the family. That brings you up on our education. The only other 2 little speed bumps in life have been at mile 50. I flunked my mammogram and got told I had breast cancer. So I'm a walking, breathing advertisement for annual mammograms and for participating in clinical research trials, which I went and signed up for when I got diagnosed, because I knew in my heart that the very best treatment available is inside of a clinical trial, because there was somebody like me nipping at the heels of the doctor to make sure it did it right. So I was in a clinical trial for my breast cancer. That's been 6 years ago. I'm disease-free and figure I won't hear from that again. And then last year we had a house fire. And so if breast cancer was a speed bump in the road of life, the house fire was kind of the pothole in the road of life, as I stood in my bedroom in 2 inches of sooty water and went, you know, there's no yellow body bags, the coroner's not out there, the rest of this is stuff that can be replaced. So, now that we've broken some ice, I'm going to go chew some of it, and I'll try not to make too much noise while you're talking.